Today we're talking about 8 spiritual awakening symptoms that you may be experiencing on your awakening or ascension journey. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the Finding Your Magic podcast. If you are new here, my name is Kim. I help people with awakening, ascension, and finding their magic. And today on the podcast, I want to talk about some of the symptoms that you may experience with spiritual awakening, or symptoms that can show that you're moving into alignment and ascending. So the spiritual awakening process is a little bit different for everyone. There's not really an end-all, be-all list of awakening symptoms. Some people have a lot of them, some people don't. Some happen as you get further in your journey. Some people have a lot really early and in a very intense way. It's all different depending on the person. So I'm just going to jump right into my list here that I wanted to go over today. The first symptom of awakening that I wanted to talk about today is the sense that things are just different. Maybe you were learning about something and all of a sudden you had what I like to call a brain break. You realized that things aren't quite what you thought that they were. And it kind of feels like your brain gets cracked open and all of a sudden you have this shift where you're like, okay, so what I thought was set, was right, was what my life is not quite right. That is often a beginning huge thing that happens when you begin your awakening process. So I know in my awakening process, I had a lot of these brain breaks. I still have these brain breaks. I love brain breaks. I love giving brain breaks to people because that's where we get to grow. So we get to like crack open this box of what we thought was correct and what we thought designated who we were and what we were doing or what we're doing here on earth or who other people are. And it's just this big shift where all of a sudden you feel more open and more accepting of alternative thought processes and things like that. So you'll often feel like a little just off, I guess, is the only way that I can think to explain it. Sometimes it's just this feeling like, oh, okay, I can release that and then I can just sit with this calm and let go of things that I thought I needed to hold on to that I no longer need to hold on to. It could be a lot of anxiety. Actually, early on in my awakening process, I had these anxiety attacks. And this is actually super common. Like there are physical, so like I'm talking about like a more mental symptom of awakening, but there are physical symptoms of awakening as well. And when I was experiencing these shifts of like big expansion really rapidly, I would have these crazy anxiety attacks. I actually went to the hospital for one of them because I was just super off and super anxious and my whole body just felt incredibly weird. And I went in and they like tested my heart, they tested my lungs, they tested everything. And I was like, there is something wrong with me. And the doctor was like, no, all my tests came back fine. I was fine. They were like, you just an anxiety attack. And I was like, bro, no. But it turns out that like, yeah, it was an anxiety attack. And it happened because energetically I was shifting and it took a little while for my body to line up with what was happening to me energetically. And this happens to a lot of people. I actually went to a chiropractor a while back, and he was talking about how he has been like working through his awakening process. And he talked about having this random anxiety attack in the middle of the night and going to the ER and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, yeah, man, it's part of the awakening process. Like, it's when your body is trying to catch up to your energy, because our soul essence, our big energy, whatever, like, we are big. Our bodies are just a concentrated point of our energy. And so we're shifting really big outside of our body, and then for it to integrate into the body sometimes is really uncomfortable. So the second one that I'm going to talk about actually is I'm just going to move right into the physical kind of thing that can happen, I guess I should say, with a spiritual awakening. So some of the physical symptoms that you can have of spiritual awakening can be headaches, backaches. You can have anxiety attacks like I'm talking about. You can also have other health issues. So, and this doesn't happen to everyone. Like for me, I had big anxiety attacks. I also started to have virus type feeling and like problems in my neck and my sinuses. And that's because my chakras there were like trying to catch up with everything else. Like this still happens occasionally for me. But sometimes you can have a health problem come up suddenly, and it is not like super long lasting, but it just comes out of nowhere. And it's a sign that your body is trying to get rid of that energy in that certain part of your body, because each of the chakras are connected to different organs and spots in the body. So I had a lot of chest pain. I thought for sure I had like some kind of heart problem or a blood clot in my lungs and stuff when I was having my anxiety issues. And that's what all the testing was for. And it was all fine. So it was just my body trying to shift this stuff out. And that's just how my body processed it in that moment, or like during that time frame. So sometimes when you are making these big shifts and you're not integrating right, or you're just shifting really quickly, sometimes it'll pop up as a healing crisis. It's sometimes like a wake-up call for you to focus on that area of the body, or not necessarily that area, but that chakra and the things associated with that chakra. Okay, so then I'm going to talk about another physical type of thing. So one thing that I started experiencing often, and it still happens when I channel, is you'll experience tingling. Like I used to get tingling at the top of my head. I'm like on my crown chakra. And I thought for sure I had like a neurological problem. And I remember being in a group coaching call where she brought in a medium, and she was talking about messages coming through for us. And she got to me and she was like, do you have like tingling on your scalp and like weirdness? And I was like, dude, yeah, I feel like I have a neurological problem. Like my nerves are just not, I don't even know what's going on. And she was like, no, that happens when spirit is trying to talk to you. And when spirit is talking through you, they put their hands, they like put their energetic hands or whatever, like on your head. And to this day, that still happens. But it can happen when you're trying to download mass amounts of energy into the body. It comes in through the crown chakra. So you'll get like vibrating or tingling or things like that. Like when I channel, I get full body shakes because I take in so much energy into my physical body that everything kind of shakes. And for a long time, I thought it was weird and I hated it. And then now I'm like, oh, okay, I must be like very well dialed in. And it doesn't bother me. It's just like a normal thing for me now. But like I allow that to be a thing to let me know physically that I am dialed in correctly. And it just, when stuff like that happens, it just means that there's more light and energy flowing into you and through you. One of the things that you can do to help with this, though, I wanted to mention is you can do things like meditation to help like send that out or to help you ground down when you are like working with this energy that you're not used to working with. Chakra balancing is a big thing that helps. I know in some of my coaching things and my courses, I offer balancing through the course so that we can be pulling out that energy that doesn't need to be there anymore and balancing out these sudden influxes of energy when you're creating space for that energy to exist within the body. And if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. Not necessarily from me, but I mean like just the chakra balancing. I have some awesome friends who are great at it, who I would absolutely recommend. You might have friends too who do that, who you could ask to help you out or book sessions with them. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next one. Let's see, because I kind of jumped around on my list here. I had a list going and just jumped all over the place. That's all right. Okay, so let's move into relationships a little bit. And I don't just mean like romantic relationships. I mean, I'm talking about romantic relationships, but also friendships and family and things like that. So there's always kind of a tower moment in the awakening process because all of a sudden you might realize that not everyone in your life is going to see these changes that you're making as positive ones, especially the people who are used to being able to take up your time and your energy and who don't offer anything back. Sometimes they won't understand, so they will distance themselves, or there will be like a friction there in that relationship. Other times you might not like the way that relationship looks as you have begun expanding. You'll realize that the relationships that you have been in haven't been allowing you the space that you needed to grow, or you're not able to connect with that person in the way that you were before because all of a sudden you have this bigger, much different awareness of yourself and the world around you and your relationships and situations and things. So a lot of times as you're working through your awakening process, you will kind of shed people. Like it was insane when this was happening for me, and it happens every time I have a big level up. People find reasons or find ways to just kind of exit my life. Like it's happened to most of the people that I know. Actually, like all of the people I know who have gone through an awakening process. But all of a sudden, people will just find reasons to exit. I had this friend who I was learning more about myself and expanding and growing, and it was this beautiful thing that I was experiencing, and she just could not handle the fact that I wasn't able to be there for her beck and call because I was learning about like honoring myself more and setting healthy boundaries. And when I brought that up, she was not excited about it. So that friendship just naturally like ended. anyway, this happens a lot in relationships too, where you'll realize that your relationship or your friendship or whatever, there's just not room there for you to grow, and there's not a support system there to help you as you're going through this growth and learning. And the thing to keep in mind when this is happening is that even though you might isolate because this is happening and you just need to take the time to focus on you and grow, as you are doing that and you're stepping further into alignment, your vibration is going to match other people. Like, the universe is going to bring you other people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, who are vibrating at the frequency that you're vibrating at, who will help lift you up and you can lift them up. All of a sudden, you will just draw these people in. And as quickly as those other people found reasons to vacate your life, you will find people who will very quickly step in and understand you on a different level because they're at that same level with you. And it's this magical connection that you will make with other people. And it's something that is phenomenal to experience and something that is phenomenal to see happen for other people. It is so cool and one of my favorite parts about the awakening process, just the people who are drawn into you and who connect with you in that way. Okay, so for the fifth symptom that we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk about becoming more aware of the things around you that are ready to be released. As you get further and further through your awakening process, you'll find that things will come up to be released. This is kind of a constant thing in awakening and ascension and all of that. It's constant. There will be little things that come up to be released, and you'll realize that, like, oh, I don't need to hold on to this story, this title, this label, this whatever. It'll come up to be let go, to make room for something so much better. Because when we release, it makes room for better things to come to us. So you'll start to have more clarity about the things that you're holding on to that you don't actually need to hold on to. And a lot of it tends to be stories. And there's a lot of inner child work that goes into the awakening process. You'll all of a sudden think about something that happened when you were a kid and it defined the way that you think about certain things. And you'll go back and be like, oh, wow, okay, that isn't correct, I guess. So I can release that. So, like, as you become aware of the things that are no longer serving you, that you don't need to hold on to, you'll find that it's way easier to see them, realize them, really, and then dive into why and how that's no longer serving you. And then you will change that story to be something that does serve you. This can happen with habits and things too. For example, we started really shifting the way that we eat and the things that come into our home, things like that. For a long time, I was a smoker, and that was a negative habit that I carried for a long time. And when I decided that I didn't want to be harming my body with that, and I didn't want my children to grow up around that, I wanted to be able to run with my kids or laugh without coughing and things like that. This is obviously a very physical habit that I'm talking about. There are like mental habits and stuff too. This is just the easiest thing I could think of. But when I saw that as a negative thing that I was ready to shift, I just shifted that story and I was like, okay, I'm not a smoker. I am a non-smoker. I am able to run and play with my children. And I knew that I had the power to make that happen. So I broke out of that box and released it. And then I was able to step in and make better habits. So I could identify the negative pattern for me, in this example, smoking, and then release it. Because the very first thing that you have to do is be able to be aware of it, right? This happens with triggers that come up too. I talk about triggers all the time in my coaching. Triggers are just things coming up to the surface to be released. And they're not always very clear, like smoking, super easy example for me to make, but other things like the judgments of others or being afraid of being seen or anything like that. All of those things come up, and they're way easier to see when you can look at it from a different kind of state, a state of openness and things like that. Okay, so let's move on to the next awakening symptom that you can have. You may notice that you become more sensitive to energy. So your physical senses kind of amp up, and part of that is because as you level up, you clear out some of the things that have you bogged down in your energy field. And like we talked about how your energy is way bigger than your body, right? As you clear these things out of your field and you begin to align and awaken and expand your energy, you can take in more information. Your sensitivity is increased because you have the feelers out there that are not being bogged down by other things. So you might find yourself in the flow state more, where you're able to just exist and be happy and lean into the things that you want to do. You may notice that your intuition kind of moves into high gear, or you may notice that your clairs come in way stronger. That is a super common symptom of awakening, and why a lot of people view the clairs and psychics and things like that as a part of, as like a step in the awakening process. So it's just, you're just able to see and feel the energy of everything around you. You feel connected to everything. The seventh one that I'm going to talk about is synchronicity. I love synchronicity. So I remember one time I was sitting at my mother-in-law's and they were out of town. We were like house sitting, and I experienced these synchronicities, and I at the time didn't have a word for it, but I decided that I was going to sit and meditate. It was kind of early on in my mediumship journey, and I sat down and was meditating, and I asked if one of my guides would step forward and give me their name and kind of show me what they looked like. And I asked if they would step forward and be my gatekeeper, because I was getting like energetically bombarded by people in spirit and feelings, and all of my stuff was like turned up to 110 and I didn't know how to turn it down. And so I asked my guide to like make themselves known to me and kind of give me a name to call them by so I know who I'm talking to, because that's always nice. And so I did that, and my guide, Anaya, came forward, and she gave me like an image of what she looks like, or the way that I could picture her when I'm talking to her, because I'm a very visual person. And so she came forward and presented herself as like being ready to be my guide on this journey and to help me like keep track of the energies that were coming to talk to me and help me know that I could turn it off and when I could step away and say, no, I'm good. Like, stop bothering me for a little bit. I need to be in the 3D. And I later looked up like the meaning of her name, and it totally resonated with what I was looking for and what I wanted. And then I did something else. Later on, I went to meditate again, and I was like, can you give me a physical sign that you are here? Like, I don't know if I need you to make a sound or what. Like, but please just give me a physical sign that you're here. And I got these tingles in my left hand, and it was like in my head, all I could see was her putting her hand on my hand, and I had physical like tingles and stuff on that side. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then I had looked up the meaning of like the tingling on that side, the hand on that side, tends to be like guides and angels and things. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I started to have synchronicities with that. It was just interesting because I would have the things happen and then look them up. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And that's not like the only kind of synchronicity that you can have. There's synchronicity in numbers. There's animals that can come to you in dreams that can provide synchronicities. There's symbols, all sorts of things like that. I feel like the most common type of synchronicity that is talked about is numbers. I have somewhere in my group and probably on Instagram a list, like a number chart that you can screenshot so that if you have any of these numbers come up, you can like quickly look up the synchronicity that has to do with it. But a lot of people will get like an 1111 when they're on the right track or beginning their spiritual or awakening process and things like that. So synchronicities can be like just you're thinking about one thing and then you're looking for a message or a response, and then a song comes on the radio that has to do with what you're thinking about and things like that. It's super cool, super easy way for spirit and guides and things to talk to us. So synchronicities are a good thing to be keeping track of. I think the last sign that I'm going to talk about is going to be kind of a sense of oneness and a belief of other, and that you're above just what you're feeling in the 3D. So a lot of people get stuck in feeling like they're just a part of the 3D. They get stuck on the hamster wheel. They're only taking care of their 3D needs, sleeping, getting up, going to work, eating, going to bed. Very much the bare minimum of the experience here on Earth and in the third density, which we're shifting. But yeah, anyway, people get stuck looking at it from the perspective of like just eye line of what's happening. And as you experience the awakening process, you begin to kind of like this heaviness that holds you down on the third density kind of begins to lift, and you're able to see from a different perspective is kind of the only way I can think about it. Instead of just being stuck in your body and just managing and just getting by, the things that bog you down kind of start to dissolve, and you become kind of a watcher of everything that is happening around you. You begin to feel connected to all of the things around you. For example, like in my Empowered Empath course, we talk about how there are different types of empaths. So there are empaths who connect to the earth and who connect to animals, who connect to plants, who connect to people, who connect to energies. Like it's all different, but it kind of eliminates this division mentality that a lot of us have, that we're just an individual competing against other individuals. You begin to see everything as a whole. You begin to see and feel how the people around you are feeling and be able to understand where they're coming from. And that happens like the more that you get into alignment and ascend and awaken. It's this really cool thing because all of a sudden your understanding of everything is very, very different than before your awakening process started, where you were separated and that things were separate from you, ideologies and things all separated. But it's not that. It's all perspective. And you begin to see that not everyone is different in a bad way. They're just honoring their truth, and that's okay too. And it just creates this oneness with everyone and everything. And it's beautiful. One of my favorite places to be on my own journey and ascension process. And once you hit this point of being able to understand kind of the oneness and everyone being interconnected in the collective consciousness, it gives you permission to see people where they're at and how they are and honor that truth in them, which allows you to honor the truth in you as well. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. There are your 8 symptoms of awakening. I hope that you're able to see which ones you are experiencing. I would love to hear which ones you have been experiencing, or which ones you are looking forward to experiencing, or which ones you're not. I suppose you can get in contact with me through my website, which is www.findingyourmagic.co, or you can find me on Facebook or Instagram, both at findingyourmagic.co. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast.